Hey, my name is Ken Levine. I'm the creative director of BioShock Infinite, and you're watching Eurogamer.
Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt.
Hey guys, Ian from Eurogamer here. The original BioShock, made by Irrational Games, was a huge commercial success and a masterclass in immersive story-driven gameplay. Its sequel BioShock 2 was developed by a completely different team, 2K Marin. It received great reviews, but for most BioShock fans it lacked the magic and atmosphere of the first. Now Irrational are back behind the reins of the franchise with their upcoming release, BioShock Infinite, and the buzz about the game couldn't be any bigger. I managed to grab an interview with Ken Levine at a recent event where I got a huge hands-on with the game, and I asked him to give me a quick rundown on the game's story for any of you guys out there who are still in the dark about this brand new chapter in the series.
BioShock Infinite really reinvents the entire BioShock universe. The game takes place in 1912 in a city in the sky called Columbia, and you play a man named Booker DeWitt, who is a former Pinkerton agent who gets a mission to go to the city and find this woman Elizabeth and bring her back to New York. And when he gets there, of course things aren't all they seem, and he gets caught up in the middle of this conflagration that, unlike previous BioShock games, you don't come there after the action, you come there and you're the center of the action. When you get to the city, it's very much alive. When you meet Elizabeth, things are going on around you, and you set off the conflict that tears the city apart, and you watch that happen in real time.
Elizabeth.
Promise me.
I will stop him.
The original BioShock is by far one of my most favourite gaming experiences. When I first entered the world of Rapture, I felt scared, isolated and hunted, but at the same time I was in total awe of my surroundings and was overwhelmed by curiosity and the need to explore. Columbia is pretty much the polar opposite to Rapture in terms of size and scale. How do you think gamers will feel when they first arrive there?
One thing I always try to do is I never try to say, in my head as a designer, I never try to say how players will feel, because that is, I think, not necessarily the right way to go about it. I can tell you what the world looks and feels like to me. You know, one thing that's surprising is how bright it is and how sunny it is when you get there. It's like a July, in America we have this holiday, July 4th, and people think of it as picnics and bright sun and bees buzzing around and birds and a cloudless blue sky. And when you get to the city, it's sort of shocking to BioShock fans because it's so different. But you sort of quickly find that even in the brightest, most sunny, most optimistic looking environments, things can be very dark and very twisted underneath. And I think that's one of the most shocking elements of the game at the very beginning, is that contrast between the themes and the tone of the game and the look of the game. They're quite striking.
When I was playing Infinite, one of the major differences I noticed between it and BioShock was the combat. In BioShock, the combat is very slow-paced, with only a few enemies attacking at once. They often hid in the shadows and ambushed you or teased you from a distance. In Infinite, the combat seems a lot more hectic and a lot more like a traditional FPS in a sense. Large amounts of enemies will swarm and rush at you, and at times the action is unrelenting. Do you think fans of the series will respond well to this type of gameplay change?
We've heard that a couple of times from people, because I think their perception is the world is so detailed and so interactive and so interesting that what they're really reacting to is that when the combat starts, it's very brutal right from the very beginning, and the pacing of some of the combat can be quite relentless. And what we try to do as the game goes on is you really have a much broader range of action than the first BioShock game, where most encounters tend to be somewhat the same, sort of one or two enemies in a tight corridor. Where this game, as you go on, you'll see lots of sort of very traditional BioShock tight corridor, dark spaces, when you get indoors and there's whole levels that kind of feel that way. But then you have these huge ranging open air battles with skylines and floating buildings and engagements from hundreds of yards away, and sniper rifles and rocket launchers and all these incredible things zipping on the skylines back and forth. So that the combat can be faster paced, but can also be at times very similarly paced to a BioShock game.
Booker, thank you.
You mentioned the brutality of the combat then, and that's something I wanted to touch on. I was quite shocked at the way the skyhook could be used as a melee weapon, especially when you perform some pretty gory executions with it. Can you tell us a bit about why you chose to use this tool as a weapon?
We really wanted, our previous games had fairly straightforward melee weapons, and whether it was a wrench in BioShock or in System Shock 2 we had a very basic one as well. We really wanted something that felt a little more iconic, that really belonged to BioShock Infinite, and we knew we needed to have a tool to navigate the skylines, which are these sort of roller coaster type devices that you hook onto with this hook. And we also, when we took a look at it, we thought, because we had a practical design for how that would work, this sort of spinning hook that it has that grabs onto things. We thought it would also make a very effective melee weapon. And in the game, you have a ability, if you play your cards right, to do these execution maneuvers on enemies that are quite shocking and brutal. But we wanted to have that kind of visceral feeling, and right from the start of combat, because it can be a brutal place, Columbia.
We've seen a whole host of weird and wacky enemies from the game in recent video featurettes, and I got to tackle a few of them during my playtime, but I'm interested to know what enemy you think my viewers should be most excited about going toe-to-toe with.
I think I'm partial to the Voice of Silence, and I think that level in particular is going to be a really nice change-up for the player. They really own this one level. And I can't go too much into it, but I love the way they look, I love the way they sound, I love the sort of vibe they put into the game. So I'm a big fan of theirs, and Rob Waters just did a great design for them.
It did take me a while to get used to the new way the combat flowed, especially in the larger areas and while using the skyhooks, but something that seemed almost natural to me from playing the original BioShock was the use of Vigors, which are basically plasmids with a different name. I was very pleased with how well they worked in conjunction with the on-screen action, and how easy it was to use them to create opportunities for Booker to deliver some massive damage. What are your views on these Vigors and how they differ from BioShock's plasmids?
One thing I think that's great about the Vigors is they're a bit more. Some of the functions are somewhat similar. Some of the functions are quite different because, for instance, you have a Vigor like Undertow, which is all about either pushing enemies like off ledges and things like that. This great kind of experience of knocking these guys into thin air and watching them fall into space, or pulling enemies from a great distance close to you if you're very melee oriented. Because a Vigor like that wouldn't make much sense in BioShock 1 because the distances just weren't great. And there was nothing to knock people off of. But also each Vigor has an alt fire, either an alt fire or a trap, a version of it which you can set, which you can do by holding down the button instead of just tapping it. And also each Vigor has two separate upgrades that modifies how it works, and it also can be modified by the gear you have on. We have a whole gear system in this game, traditional RPG style gear, four slots, and an item you can put in each slot. So you can really outfit yourself to be like very Vigor oriented, or very melee oriented, or very range combat oriented. But all these systems sort of talk to each other.
Thanks, Ken. Now finally, Rapture or Columbia? Where would you rather live?
I think Columbia would smell a little better. Rapture probably doesn't smell very good.
Oh crap, I probably shouldn't invite you around my house then. I've not tidied it in ages and the toilet hums. Ugh. Now don't forget to subscribe to Eurogamer by clicking the annotation link that's right there on the screen, right there, right now, because we'll be showering you guys with BioShock Infinite coverage in early 2013, including loads of early gameplay footage and Let's Plays.